So tell us, I know you've started a million shows, you performed on a million shows from open mics up to gala events. What's the weirdest place that you've done stand-up venue-wise?
The weirdest venue?
Yeah.
I actually don't even know. I'm trying to think. What were you saying?
I was going to say maybe it's a show that you produced yourself, because you've produced shows in a pizza parlor, yeah?
Yeah. Oh, you mean like weird, not even in a bad way, like just in general, like.
Yeah, I just mean weird where you were like, what? There's a show in a laundromat? Like, that's bizarre. Like those.
Okay,
those
positive weird is great. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I'm always like, okay, what was the biggest disaster I did?
Well, you can tell us that.
No,
you can share that too. But
no, I actually did a show that I was like really pumped about, and it fell apart in LA. It was at a skate shop, and it was really cool. It was like they had all the boards on the wall behind you, so it was like all this like multicolored board. They had lights already built in to show the boards, and then it was like you can smoke weed and drink in there, and pizza. You know, it was like a really good time, and we ended up doing I think like 3 or 4, and they were all like packed, like maybe like 50 plus 60 people. People were standing on the road watching from outside. It was a really cool thing to do.
But it didn't continue?
Weird.
What happened? How come it didn't continue?
The skate shop, I knew that they were getting weird about it, because it all started because somebody told me that they had a hookup with a big skate company. And again, remaining nameless, I shouldn't have listened to this person, because I went to the skate shop and I told them, hey, I might have a connection with Mark Appleyard, who's a very big, or was a big skateboarder. And I wasn't thinking about it. I was just trying to get in the door somewhere. And they were like, really? And I'm like, yeah, like we got to do a couple shows, because there was no budget. I didn't ask them for money. I asked them to pay them, but they didn't want to, because they were kind of into the idea. So after the second or third show, you got to think about it. What does a venue that's not comedy care? Like, what are they gaining? Because in my mind, I'm building a good show. We were selling out, you know, making a couple bucks, nothing crazy. I would try and pay everyone on the show and throw the venue some beers and food and some money. But I saw that they were getting a little bit weird. And I go to the guy, I'm like, look, man, like, you got to tell me, like, what's up? Like, I can't work with you if there's this weird energy happening here. And he's like, what's the point of this? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, what's the point of this? Where does it go? And I'm like, nowhere. We just do shows. Like, and he's like, man, I just don't.
He's like, what's the point of joy and laughter? Where is this going?
But it's like, for them, it's like he had to come back, open up. And
right.
And he's like, you know, when you came here, you were saying that you had this Mark Appleyard connection and blah, blah, blah. And like, the other thing was, I literally worked across the street at the pizza place. So like, I couldn't just never see this guy again. Like, we were going to run into each other. So I felt bad. I'm like, man, like, look, like, even with a sponsorship, we need to do a handful of shows. I've been filming the shows, creating content. We need to put a video, and we can try and get some sponsors. But I can't tell you that this Mark Appleyard thing is legit, because the guy I shouldn't have listened to. And that was the last time we did the show, which sucked.
Rest in peace, skate shop show.
It was a good show.
Now, continuing on odd shows, you've also produced and created some interesting shows, whether it's a live show or now some things for TV and film and some game shows. I remember one of the cool things you first did, and I think this was with Garrett, and maybe there was a few other people involved at the Rivoli. You had a show called the Twitter Gong Show, where the concept. Do you want to just maybe you explain the concept?
You want me? I can do it, or you can.
Yeah. You go ahead. You go ahead. I'll comment, but it was great. I thought it was super cool.
Well, you got to remember, for the time, this was kind of like a cool thing, because it wasn't happening back then. But it was a live variety show, like the Gong Show, with a Twitter feed that was live streamed on the stage. So it was actually really cool, because nothing really had this multimedia, not even like in Toronto, but anywhere. Like, it was, because it actually got me a lot of attention from people in New York, like agents and stuff like that. And it was a Twitter Gong Show. We actually got a cease and desist, or assist, whatever the hell it's called, from the Gong Show, because we were like promoting it so much that they were like, we're going to sue you if you keep using Gong Show. But yeah, so what would happen is we would get these acts, and then people would perform, and then we had a live Twitter feed. So the audience would do hashtag Twitter Gong, and then we would see all their feed on the screen, which was it was honestly like it was a show that I like kind of pulled out of my ass to just because I was like bored. And we did it, and the lineup with literally 2 posters went down the Queen on the Rivoli because it was self-promoting, because people were, and again, this was like early social media-ish days where nobody knew that your social media, your Twitter was connected to everything. So people got mad because they were like, man, you posted like 5,000 things on Facebook, all these Twitter posts and all that. But it was promoting the show because we started getting people from like New York and Los Angeles and other cities seeing Twitter Gong in all these feeds. And then they would start not knowing what's happening. They were like, I don't know what the hell's happening, but everyone's commenting Twitter Gong. And then so they would start typing. And it was a really cool thing. But I wasn't involved in the cabaret world. So unlike comedy, people don't like getting made fun of in the real arts. And it was very hard to book the show, and that's why it kind of ended up fizzling out, because we didn't have performers.
Right. So essentially, while the act was on stage doing their thing, whether it was a song and dance or ventriloquist or mime or whatever, they would be getting roasted on Twitter behind them.
If they sucked.
I mean, even if they were doing great, people were still trying to roast them. And then didn't you also have sort of a panel of judges too? You would have
so we had the voice of Twitter, which was Barry Taylor, who would read all the best tweets out. We had Matt O'Brien, Christina Walkinshaw, maybe Julia Lakowitz. We had people who were comics that were like the Twitter panel, and they would be the decision of like, did you get gonged or not? And then Garrett was actually the gong master, and he could trump anybody, and he would come out with a cloak and like a big hammer. And if it was really bad and they weren't gonging you like the judges, then he would gong you, and then that was it. But it was fun. Yeah,
it was super fun. I remember being there, and it was that cool room. For anyone who's ever been to the Rivoli for stand-up or any show, it's a great, that back room was one of the best live venues.
Yeah, it's like a perfect venue.
Yeah, it was amazing.
The stage is a little high, but it's a really good spot.
It is a little high. You're right. The stage is a bit high.